Great. Thanks a lot, 𝐀𝐝𝐯, and good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here and host this event. Well, as 𝐀𝐝𝐯 introduced, basically 𝐶-Factor is already 1 year old, and basically the first year of the project was mainly dedicated to have a better understanding on the role of temporary uses in urban regeneration. As you may all know, at least at European level, this is still sort of emergent topic. The terminology is not yet consolidated. Strategies and practices are so different. So it was important for us to really get a sense of what is out there and the different practices and experiences that are emerging. And more than that, what we really want to somehow better understand is whether the application of temporary uses in the so-called waiting time of urban regeneration can bring about, can raise the bar really of urban regeneration outcomes and ambitions for the long term. And with this waiting time, I mean, we really consider the time period that stands in between the approval of the master plan or pre-master plan on the one hand, and then the final delivery of the regenerated areas. Indeed, we all know that this period of time is becoming longer and longer and much more complex, and therefore with 𝐶-Factor we really want to understand whether this waiting time can actually become a period of testbed for better cities, basically. So we are about to start this quick interview with Ramón Ribera Fumaz, who is the director of the Urban Transformation and Global Change Lab at the Open University of Catalonia. Ramón and team have been leading the research in the first year. And so, Ramón, if you are okay, I think we can start. Maybe you want to put your presentation on, and I will make the very first question, let's say. And yeah, basically, yeah. Do you want to
thank you, Laura. Just can I have permission rights to upload the presentation, because I can at this moment.
You have Ramón.
Okay.
You can go ahead, please.
Thank you, Vesnik. Sorry, Laura.
Yeah, put the presentation on and then I start the interview. Great.
Yeah, you see that presentation. Sorry, I have a problem. So, Laura, whatever you want.
Great, Ramón. Very, let's say, first question is whether you can give us, let's say, a bit of introduction and context to the work that you have been leading, just to really set the stage and help everybody to better understand what we did in the first year of the project.
Well, the first thing, just very quickly, I want to say that we have, this is a cooperative work that has been terrific during pandemic times, where with 6 teams in 6 different cities, plus the help of people in like Francesca in Shanghai and Kendall in New York. And we have focused not in the regeneration process, because these processes are very famous, very popular, and there is a lot about them to find out. But in the particular aspect, as you said, of temporary uses, during the waiting time, from the beginning of the projects until the end, in different projects with different scales or magnitude of regeneration, different time scales as well, very different, but all of them that share the use of temporary uses as a way of enhancing and improving the process of urban regeneration. And we try to learn about them, of these practices, and get some insights from the point of view of the public and private developers and promoters, intermediaries and practitioners, to have to put them in motion. So this is what we did, basically.
Great, thanks, Ramón. And I mean, indeed, we have seen how the local context matters in urban regeneration, right? And all these 8 experiences are so different and so specific. Still, would you say that we have observed, let's say, of course, shared trends for common dynamics across these 8 cases? And more than that, how would you describe how temporary uses actually fit with this changing landscape in urban regeneration, and indeed more recently vis-a-vis the pandemic?
Well, I think, let me start by the last question. We have seen during this year of pandemic that cities across the world, particularly in the public space, but not only in the public space, but as well in some back and Lodz, issues like shelters, etc. We have seen that cities has been experimenting with temporary uses as a way of testing, proving things during pandemics, and testing not only for the present of the pandemic situation, but for the future. So I think that what this report that is publicly available already shows, and the research that we have done is precisely before that that openness to experiment with temporal uses in the cities has been common, or has been normalized, or has been set as a good tool. What we have seen is how different places would have different processes in motion, but all of them were process of transformations, of change, to attracting new residents, to new uses, to deal with challenges like gentrification or social inclusion in decayed areas, have used these temporal uses to face these challenges on the one hand, and as well to try to improve the city and improve the redevelopment of the area.
Good. Thank you, Ramon. And next question, I mean, trying to narrow down a bit the conversation, I think another interesting thing that we have noticed is that across these 8 experiences, actually strategies of meanwhile uses have emerged in many different ways and been applied with completely different, let's say, strategic intents. So in that diversity, would you still say that there are some common traits or common approaches that can set a path when we have to strategize temporary uses in urban regeneration?
Yes, you're right. I mean, I think that any temporary use or any regeneration project has used more than one temporary use for different things. But more generally speaking, these strategies in each place corresponds to 3 main goals of temporary uses. The first one is marketing and attraction. I mean, for instance, you see in the image here the case of New York Industry City. You have one of the biggest metropolis in the world that have almost everything, and you have a space where that is located not in the main corridors of mobility or in a very populated area. So Industry City was very successful in attracting people to this place through the use of temporary uses of the space. So one particular thing that all the advanced cases share is that either they are located in distant places from downtowns or centers of activity, or they are in decaying areas where people doesn't like to go. So one thing that achieve temporary uses in that regard is to bring in people to know the place, and that's very important, and is starting to familiarize. This is very related with the second sort of strategy, as we can see in this photograph about Lodz, that in decaying areas is temporary uses when still there is a lot of bricks of mortgages, demolition and deprivation. You can have the local communities, but as well these people who comes from outside to build a place, to make place. For instance, through programs like the Lighthouse Keeper that you can see in the report, or the Quarter Cafe Union in Dortmund that later it will explain, which brings people to participate as well in the regeneration, making that the regeneration is not only about the developers or the city council doing something, but bringing the people there. That's very important. From a construction or a vision point of view, there's a third that we cannot ignore and has been really important. And for instance, in the case of manufactured tobacco, there has been excellent ways of doing that, is that temporary uses can be as well of testing things that are program planned for the future, they are not built. Then it allows you to see if things are working or not, and making correction, maybe small corrections, but to tuning to make even a better place. In that regard, this is might be the 3 main strategies. I mean, there is no single place, no single meanwhile use or temporary use that fits only one category. Maybe one is more important than the others, but they are mixed and intertwined, and a way of thinking how you might develop temporary uses in order to enhance and boost the sense of place and urban regeneration. Another thing is that if we have this kind of measured strategies, you also have means or key aspects, I mean, to take in account. These places that we have studied, where meanwhile uses has been useful and successful, is because they have been very carefully attracting and setting the agenda for different audiences and their needs. I mean, there is no one size fits all, but that you have to have a self-reflection of which is the vision of the regeneration, how this engages with different audiences, that might be you want to attract, but maybe as well local communities, how they can benefit from the development. A second thing that is important on that is that one of the ways of bringing people together more easily and as well intersectionally between different collectives is through arts and culture programs. I mean, we have seen that for instance, in all cases, that the mobilization of high art or digital, for instance, contemporary art, like in Manufactura or in Industry City, with more forms of popular art, like skateboarding and graffitis in La Frige or Dortmund, or digital art, like in Barcelona and Manufactura, allows to bring people from different backgrounds, from local communities and from outside to the place and rethink the space and making a space on that sense. And last but not least, the very important issue is that when temporary uses are planned or designed and they are successful, they usually you have to have them as with a vision of being nomadic and flexible. Indeed, you want to use in the area, you know that the space that it occupies might be temporal, but this you might think that it can be moved. It can be moved in the area or elsewhere, like for instance, Manufactura Tabaki did with B9, where they test bed ideas for the future development, or the skip garden in London, like the photograph that you can have in your right side down position, that urban gardening that can be moved as the regeneration evolves.
Thanks, Ramon. Next question is about, let's say, so-called enabling levers, right? Because we have noticed that indeed we are talking about temporary uses are super complex, right? And they need many different things to unfold and to really bring about results and impact. So could you tell us something about that?
Yeah, there are things that helps, or that the absence of them might make more difficult to evolve. One thing that is important in temporary use is that, for instance, there are countries and national planning cultures that enhance them and helps them to be more present in urban regeneration and then take most of it. Like for instance, in England and in the United Kingdom, we have section 106, or for instance, in Dortmund, case study that then we will learn more about it. We will see that the experimental city and residential development national program and having legislation about temporary uses has been something that has helped a lot to develop these temporary uses. Of course, if there is regulation, much better. If it's not, for instance, in case of Barcelona, one of the problems that it has is that there are very rigid zoning codes, so making it more difficult. But then when you don't have regulation, sometimes the political willingness and the policy willingness of the city council or the regional or national state can overcome this lack of regulation and help finding original ways of moving forward. Again, creating temporary uses means spending money, and we can have a kind of short-sighted vision that it is a cost, that in huge developments on already there is a lot of money being spent, that we also have to spend a little bit more of money, that in relation to the general budget might be low, but thinking like that. Or we can think that this is an investment, This is an investment that if there is, if we spend some money on these temporary uses, we are accelerating the creation of a community, we're accelerating the regeneration process. And so we create a better place, but as well developers can have faster or a better return of investment by valorizing the space in itself quicker. Indeed, another thing that's successfully about funding and as well is the relation with governance. When you engage with communities, when you get public and private sector collaborating together, there is always easier to find streams or avenues of funding that can help generate these temporary uses and enhance the place. But for all of that, I think that the very important thing is that we need, if you don't have the culture of temporary uses, you need to change mindsets. And I think that, for instance, this is not a thing that we really explored in the report because it was about the past. But I think that the pandemics and the experiments and something the city as a lab, an experience like the 15-minute city, 101-minute city, and all the experience that we have seen during the pandemics, is opening the mindsets of public authorities and local communities and developers to experiment and then deal with this form of governance and funding and creating and generating this social fabric. No, I mean that at the end of the day, a place is living. People goes to places where there are things going on, where there is a social fabric that allows to create innovation, to make a place being better than other places, and that's a key issue.
Yeah, well, my next question is really about, let's say, the value flows or the benefits of doing temporary uses strategies and urban regeneration. Of course, knowing that it's really hard to measure, let's say, the impacts and really attribute certain impacts to temporary uses, because they indeed are closely connected to the broader regeneration process, right? So I think that what we have been observing is that we still lack somehow some monitoring and evaluation frameworks that can really help us somehow measure the contribution of temporary uses. Still, are there some highlights about the co-benefits of temporary uses, so to speak, how they can become a win-win strategy for different audiences and publics and urban regeneration? What do they bring about?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's very difficult to measure, but particularly if you look for quantitative performance indicators, but qualitatively, and speaking with the communities, speaking with policymakers, and speaking with developers in all advanced case studies, we reached the conclusion that there might be a lot of different benefits and spillover effects. I mean, in the report they are more accurately explained, but just let me tell you that there are, of the three categories that we can find, we have that there are direct benefits, the use of may and wild. I mean, I think that we can summarize them in establishing a location, making place. I mean, again, when you are in a decay area or in a non-centric area and you want to convert them in a new centrality, and everything is under construction, or things are not happening there, or they have bad press about the area, may and wild uses, temporary uses, might be critical in changing mindsets. It might be critical in attracting talent and creativity, in generating a dialogue with communities to see what's going on, and of course accelerating the regeneration of place and that changing as in the mindsets. But as well, there are indirect benefits. Well, if direct benefits we define as direct benefits or co-benefits, I mean, things that has been straightforward, that when meanwhile use has happened, these things has happened and has been seen by local stakeholders directly in a very short span of time. Not directly, but attached to it and building more long-term benefits. There is obviously about things about improving local commerce and services, increasing property values, because I mean there is regeneration faster, and changing as well city policies and strategies. I mean, it's also as well for policymakers. It's a good way of test some things that then might be viral and going upscale. For instance, in Barcelona, the superblocks that was tested in Poblenou in the 22 project, and then now it's coming general policy in the city. But I would say that two critical things are perceptions and social trust. I mean, when you engage with temporary users that as well are co-designed and co-participated by local communities, you create social trust between actors. You relax the kind of oppositions, you relax and you mitigate the kind of opposition because you talk, you negotiate, you create a dialogue and bring all to most of the actors together. And so this is a win-win solution for everybody. And of course, this generation of temporary uses with social trust, with improving the area and helping improve it, attracting people, making community feeling better. Again, what they do is making more thriving places in terms of economy, creating new experiments that might become solidified as new urban assets. For instance, digital or media labs, gardens, urban gardens, community gardens that then generates community and therefore are very well valued by locals, but as well visitors, etc. But again, you can just suggest you to go to the report and see a fantastic work and very nice examples that will put concrete examples of what I'm saying.
Great. My very last question, Ramon, also time-wise. Well, I think that at the end, it seems like a very beautiful story, right? But we know that it's not always like that. And at the end, what we know is that temporary uses as they unfold in the context of urban regeneration can also cast shadows and really bring about additional conflicts and additional risks. So, I mean, could you tell us a bit about these key challenges that indeed will be faced later on through all the different cases and stories that we are about to listen to?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think that temporary uses or meanwhile spaces are fantastic, are terrific and helps a lot, but they are not magic bones. I mean, if there are problems beneath that, they might help contribute to improve it, but it's not only on that, and also they have their own risk. I think that they are offset by the benefits, but for instance, I like to, as you see in the screen, I like to see it in kind of dualities. I mean, there is a strategic risk. I mean, how far you go. I mean, because we know that there are different time scales, for instance, on economic return or social return. Different interests that also requires different might be in contradiction. So how much you go, it might be that you go too far with the temporary use, or you get short and then there is mechanism. I mean, and all of that depends. I think it's quite related to the problem of changing mindsets and a culture of temporary uses. I mean, there are sometimes you face that some critical stakeholders might be completely against temporary uses. Sometimes might be the developers, sometimes it's the local community, sometimes it's the policy makers. And if we don't change and we explicitly show that there are risks worth taking because the benefits offset the small problems that might face, it's difficult. The other thing is again, urban regeneration process, what it does is create value. There's a value creation, but I hope this is redistributed. I mean, if value creation is only captured by one sort of agent, this might create tensions. But if it's fairly distributed or widely distributed, also you have the problem that maybe it's not, that the investment is not as having the return that it should have, and then maybe make that investment is not as desired. I mean, it's always a thing that the temporary users also must face. And again, it's important that if we are all talking about usually in urban regeneration in areas with problems of social exclusion, how you deal with inclusion, how you engage as well about with participation. There has been a lot of increase, for instance, in Europe, in urban in regeneration and urban codes to include participation in the process of urban regeneration. I think that temporary space is a good way of testing this real participation, because as well, when this participation is not only participation washing, but it's real, the results are better for everybody, for developers, for policymakers, and for local communities. But it has a cost, an entry cost an experience that needs to be dealt with, and particularly in order that these temporary uses doesn't stop of being something that we can explain. 10 years ago, there was an urban garden here, or there was this fantastic digital place, digital lab here, but there is legacy that makes that, thanks to these temporary uses, that some of them has been settled in the neighborhoods, maybe in the same place or in another place. We have this framing community, and we have a win-win solution. And here I think I'm out of time, so I will stop. Again, suggesting that you go to the fantastic report and learn more about it.
Great, thanks a lot, Ramon. Thanks for sharing your learnings through this work. I will now pass the floor to Alejandra from Technical University of Dortmund to really kick off the session with the stories and the experiences. And thanks again, Ramon. Thanks, everybody.